She wasn't supposed to exist in the field, just a logistics officer with a clipboard and a ponytail. But when Selene Voss picked up a sniper rifle at Blackstone Range, everything they thought they knew about skill, instinct, and survival shattered. I wasn't supposed to be here. No one looked my way, no one kept score of my presence, and certainly no one took me seriously. They called me logistics, a ghost in uniform who carried clipboards instead of rifles, who scribbled notes instead of pulling triggers. Until the day Selene Voss lifted a sniper rifle and shattered every expectation in Blackstone Range. One shot, one truth revealed. They had underestimated me. Careful there, Voss. That thing'll slap harder than anything you've ever felt. Their voices tumbled over each other, jokes spilling out as casually as air. I let them laugh. It didn't touch me. To them, I wasn't a soldier. Not in the way that mattered. My name didn't even appear on the range roster. I was an observer, a note-taker, a shadow with a badge. My uniform was blank. No patches, no stripes, no accolades. Just a pen, a clipboard, and a ponytail that everyone mistook for compliance. We were in Blackstone Range, a merciless stretch of high desert outside Reno's outskirts. Its canyons carved shadows that ran like veins across the jagged cliffs, and the wind twisted unpredictably over its mesas. Elite recon units came here for tests designed to humble even the most confident marksmen. On that morning, the range buzzed with overconfidence. Every man there fancied himself the fastest, the sharpest, the deadliest. One of the older spotters, skin leathery from years under the sun, handed me the rifle like it was a prop for a circus. A monstrous, .50 caliber, the kind that made the muscles in your shoulder ache before the round even left the barrel. "Hold it steady," he said, smirk in place. "This one bites." I said nothing. I lowered myself onto the mat, aligning my body with the weight and balance of the weapon as if it had been an extension of my own arm for decades. Their laughter swelled, eager to watch a logistics officer fumble with what they thought was a toy too big for me. One of them leaned over my shoulder, curiosity winning over mockery. I tilted my head, voice calm, even, almost a whisper. "I've seen what I needed to." They assumed I meant I was tuning out their noise. They were wrong. I was listening. The desert spoke in ways their calculators could never read. The wind curling off cliffs, twisting over sand, halting for a heartbeat before flowing again like a living rhythm. I slid 10 feet to the left without a word. The laughter stilled. "Why'd she move?" someone muttered. The older spotter's eyes narrowed. "That's the windbreak line," he said under his breath. "She's reading the slope." I didn't confirm it. I let my hands work on the rifle, adjusting the bipod, the scope, preparing in silence. The steel target waited in the brush, 200 yards away. They didn't give me a readout. They didn't think I'd fire. But I already was. I exhaled. The wind paused, a subtle beat no one else noticed. I squeezed the trigger. The rifle thundered, recoil slamming through my shoulders, but I absorbed it. The round tore through the valley and struck true. Dead center. The laughter died instantly. I handed the rifle back, calm, unremarkable, as if it had never belonged to me. "Thanks," I said. Their eyes followed me like I was a phantom, something they couldn't name. And maybe they were right. I walked toward the equipment shed, clipboard tucked under my arm like armor. The gravel crunched beneath my boots, each step deliberate, measured, carrying the rhythm I'd practiced for years. Inside, the hum of the desert sun pressed against the walls, heat bending the edges of everything I looked at. No one spoke. Their confusion trailed me like smoke. A younger shooter finally broke the silence, voice barely audible. "That wasn't luck. She used sound, echoes, nobody teaches that." I didn't turn. I had long ago learned that recognition was fleeting, respect fragile, and admiration always conditional. What mattered was control, precision, and survival. My rifle, my tools, my methods, they weren't things to show off. They were things to preserve. By the time I reached the lockers, whispers had already started. Someone was digging through the personnel network. Curiosity among professionals is stubborn and patient, relentless in ways I'd learned to expect. But they would find nothing, not really. Selene Voss. Logistics. Observer. Non-combat assignment. The pages were redacted to uselessness. A name, a badge, a role that did not exist beyond the paperwork. a top-secret ciphered illusion of a soldier. If they pushed further, if someone dared to burn through clearance levels, fragments of what lay beneath would appear. A word here, a number there. Insignificant unless you knew the language. Raven line. Not a unit, not in the conventional sense. A thread, pulled through operations where precision outweighed force, where silence meant life, and instinct was currency. Years ago, I had carried that thread, until it frayed me to the bone. Command buried me in logistics. Or perhaps I buried myself. It didn't matter. Selene Voss, sniper, operative, legend erased. And yet, in the heat of Blackstone Range, with the rifle resting in my hands, I realized that erasure was never complete. My gear case was at the shed, leather cracked, worn, bearing the marks of 1,000 unrecorded missions. Inside, the rifle lay waiting. Not government-issued, not registered. Custom, tuned, and made for me alone. I laid it on the bench with the practiced care of someone returning to an old friend. The instructors and spotters lingered, uncertainty painted on faces that had moments ago laughed at me. The lead instructor approached, cautious, deliberate. "Ma'am," he said. His tone betrayed respect, maybe even fear. "We owe you." I raised a hand. "No apology needed. You couldn't have known." He swallowed, nodded, and stepped back. The unspoken truth was obvious. The valley, the range, the wind itself. These weren't things that bent to experience or bravado. They belonged to someone who listened, who understood the silent language of echoes. I returned to the mat where the laughter had begun. This time, none dared speak. The desert's rhythm called to me, the wind shifting, teasing, unpredictable. Calculators, spotter tablets, charts, they were useless here. The canyon lied, but lies had patterns. 3 shots, 3 targets, staggered distances. Breath steady, scope adjusted, fingers moving like instinct. 18 seconds between the first and last. 3 perfect strikes, each target marked by a single, precise impact. The range went still. No one moved, no one laughed. They had glimpsed what I carried, what had always been under the surface. Survival wasn't in numbers or firepower. It was in the silence, the instinct. When the last target fell, I disassembled the rifle with the same quiet precision I'd used on deployment years ago. Each piece clicked into place, a ritual, a reminder that mastery is not performance, it's discipline. Outside, whispers began to circulate. Screens flickered to life, searching personnel files, security clearances. A few lines slipped through redactions, enough to outline a truth they hadn't been prepared to accept. Wraithline, Tier 1 operative, dozens of confirmed eliminations, distances exceeding the limits of most rifles. Status, inactive. Embedded, non-combat assignments for years. And then the realization hit them. The laughter had died long before the files were found. They had been mocking a ghost. By the next morning, Blackstone Range had changed. The jokes were quieter, the bravado tempered, the glares softened with uncertainty. Every head turned when I walked past, every step measured and deliberate. Respect doesn't always announce itself. It creeps in like the desert wind, subtle, undeniable. Sergeant Dalton, the lead trainer, finally spoke during drills. Winds shifting right at 3 clicks. A recruit glanced at me, hesitant. "Do you agree, ma'am?" All eyes found me. I didn't hesitate. 2 clicks. The canyon wall on the left is funneling it back. The recruit adjusted. Dead center. Dalton said nothing, not aloud. But I could see it. The flicker of recognition, the acknowledgement that the quiet, unassuming logistics officer was something else entirely. By the 3rd day, a routine emerged. They'd fire, miss, then glance toward me, waiting. Not for praise, not for correction, but for confirmation of what they already felt. Breath, wind, terrain. They were learning to listen before they acted. I didn't speak often. Words have weight. Silence carries more. It teaches attention, patience, and respect for the environment. I watched them grow, small increments each session, subtle changes in posture, in breathing, in focus. The first week passed under the relentless desert sun. Observers came from higher command, pressed uniforms, clipboards, dark sunglasses. They didn't speak. They just watched. One officer finally approached during a break. "How exactly are you training them?" I didn't pause. "I'm not teaching them to shoot. I'm teaching them to listen." He didn't write it down. He probably didn't understand it. But he felt it, like everyone else would eventually. By the second week, the recruits were ready for rifles again, only after they could predict shifts in the wind 5 seconds before they happened. I gave them staggered targets. Some missed, but the misses were precise. Calculated. Not panic, not luck. Listening, adjusting, trusting. One hit that should have been impossible. He didn't celebrate. He breathed, leveled his eyes, and exhaled. Expected. Anticipated. It wasn't about glory, it never had been. Rumors spread faster than the desert wind. Bases called in, Pentagon representatives sniffed around, impressed by what they'd seen. They wanted to replicate it, formalize it, weaponize it. I said no. I'm not interested, I said flatly. They blinked. Not interested in what? Going back. I'm not here to pad my tally of confirmed shots. I'm here to make sure the next generation survives. They didn't understand that the lessons they wanted to mass produce weren't about numbers. They were about instinct, about presence, about listening to the world around you. If they tried to codify it, they would destroy it. And I wasn't going to let them. It happened without warning. Halfway through a routine drill, the sirens cut through Blackstone Range. Sharp, urgent, impossible to ignore. Not a drill. Real. Smoke rose over the distant ridge, a dark column slicing the sky. A convoy had been ambushed 2 miles east, pinned and trapped. The quick response teams were already stretched across the sector. The call came over the radio, clipped, urgent. Voss, bring your team in. Immediate deployment. My team. 12 recruits I'd only just begun to mold. They weren't ready. Not in any conventional sense. Fear and uncertainty were written across their faces. Hands gripped rifles with a tension I recognized all too well. I stepped forward. My voice cut low, steady, and sharp. Listen to me. What you've learned here, it wasn't theory. This is why you've been listening. Breathe. Watch. Anticipate. Trust what's around you. We moved fast, across the desert, engines kicking up sand in our wake. I led, eyes scanning the horizon. Smoke thickened, black and oppressive. The ambush was in full view. 2 trucks disabled, gunfire erupting from hidden positions, return fire bouncing uselessly off rock. The recruits froze for a heartbeat. Kids with rifles staring into death. Positions I commanded. Prone. Spread. Eyes wide, but hands steady. Don't look at the targets, I said. Look at the wind. Look at the dust. Let the environment tell you what to do. I dropped beside them, scope glinting, rifle ready, but I didn't fire. Not yet. I needed to see who would act, who had internalized the lessons. A young recruit exhaled slow, finger curled on the trigger. His first shot cracked, echoed, then silence. One of the ambushers slumped. Imperfect, yes, but intentional. The others followed. Shots staggered, measured, purposeful. Not panic, not luck, but calculation informed by listening. Within 3 minutes, the ambushers broke. Scrambling from cover, they fled the hillside. The convoy below remained intact. The recruits looked at me, searching. Approval? Explanation? I gave neither. For words. This is just beginning. We rolled back to base in silence. The desert smelled of burnt powder and sand, heavy and tangible. Not triumphant, not celebratory. Just quiet. And I could read everything that silence told me. They had learned the first truth of combat. Every shot leaves weight behind. Even the right ones. Especially the right ones. At the gate, command waited. Brass polished, uniforms tight. Their faces eager, hungry for proof. Outstanding work, the range commander said. Quick response saved the convoy. You should be proud. I didn't smile. They weren't ready, not fully. Not yet. Their skills were raw, instinctive, and they had survived. That was enough. For now. Later, in the quiet of my quarters, I opened my old leather case. Not the rifle this time, but the journal tucked beside it. Logan Reeves' log, pages worn, filled with notes on wind patterns, breath, sound, rhythm. I hadn't touched it in years. But after what I saw today, after watching the raw potential of my recruits turn into action, I knew the time to teach the full depth of the craft was approaching. And I also knew something else. Command wouldn't leave me in the shadows much longer. My silence had once been protection. Now it was something else entirely, unavoidable. By morning, word of the ambush and our response had spread faster than the desert wind. Mess halls buzzed quietly with whispers. Voss's team held the line. 12 recruits survived. Unconventional marksmanship. They didn't say it aloud, but everyone knew. Then came the visitors. 2 men in pressed civilian suits, faces too clean, eyes too calculating. Pentagon. Not military, not friendly. They slid into the debriefing room as if they belonged there. "We've been following your progress, Miss Voss," one said smoothly. "Impressive. Very impressive." The other leaned forward, persuasive. "You've built something unique here, scalable. We'd like to formalize it. Deploy it. Replicate results across units." I stared at them, expression flat. "I'm not interested." They blinked. "Not interested in what?" "Going back," I said. "I'm not here to pad my tally of confirmed shots. I'm here to make sure the next generation survives. That's it." The first man's jaw tightened. The second nodded slowly, as if he'd expected resistance. They left, polite smiles intact, but the air was heavier when they exited. Weaponize instinct. Mass-produce ghosts. That wasn't my mission. My recruits weren't cogs to be replicated. They were alive, learning, surviving. And I would protect that. That night, I opened the leather case I hadn't touched in years. Not the rifle, but Logan Reeves' journal. Worn pages mapped wind patterns, breath rhythms, sound, echoes, the invisible language of survival. He had handed it to me once, saying only, "You'll know when to give it to someone else." I hadn't touched it. Couldn't. Not until now. Not after seeing the recruits transform from students to survivors in a heartbeat. Command tried to pull me in slowly, systematically. Briefings, protocols, suggestions disguised as orders. Your methods need documentation. Your recruits reassigned under central command. This program belongs to the Army, not you. I listened. I nodded. And then I went out to the range. Ignored them. Because if I handed over my methods, they'd destroy the very soul of it. Turn instinct into a checklist. Silence into routine. I would not allow it. At night, under the desert stars, I gathered my 12 again. No records, no observers. Just us, the wind, the rocks, and the rifles. Forget the manuals, I told them. Forget the calculators. The world doesn't wait for wind tables. You listen, you feel, you trust what's around you. They learned fast. Not because I pushed harder, but because they knew this wasn't drills. It was survival. Breath, pressure shifts, heat shimmer, echoes, they absorbed it all. Santos, the youngest, finally asked the question no one else dared. "Ma'am, why aren't you in charge of all this? Why hide out here?" I met his eyes. Raw honesty. Impossible to lie. "Command doesn't want a person," I said quietly. "They want a weapon. Weapons don't get to choose who pulls the trigger." No one spoke again, but I saw understanding settle in their faces. They weren't just learning to shoot. They were learning how not to be used. Then the pushback arrived faster than expected. 2 colonels, flanked by MPs, stormed in. Their message was clear. The program was no longer mine. Reassigned the recruits. My role reduced to advisor. I didn't argue, not openly. I signed. I saluted. I stepped aside, exactly as expected. But that night, I met my 12 on the far edge of the valley, where desert swallowed sound, where silence spoke. "They'll take you soon," I said. "Try to use you, bend you into their molds. Keep what I've taught you quiet. Keep it yours. Silence can't be stolen." They nodded, their faces lit by the moon, understanding etched into every line. My legend wasn't mine to carry anymore. It was theirs now. It came sooner than I expected. The drills, the routines, the measured silence. All of it was preparation for a moment none of us could predict. Halfway through a morning session, the sirens cut through Blackstone Range. Not a drill. Real. Urgent. Smoke curled over the ridge, dark and acrid. A convoy, 2 miles east, caught in an ambush. The call was clipped, direct. "Voss, mobilize your team. Immediate deployment." 12 young faces turned toward me. Eyes wide, rifles tight. Fear, uncertainty, adrenaline. They had survived drills, but this was combat. I didn't hesitate. "Listen," I said, voice low, steady. "What you've learned isn't theory. This is what it's for. Don't chase. Don't panic. Breathe. Trust your senses. Trust the environment." We moved fast, across the sun-baked desert, sand crunching under tires, the horizon warped with heat and smoke. I led, eyes scanning for any sign of the enemy. The ambush revealed itself gradually. 2 trucks pinned between hidden positions, muzzle flashes spiking from rock and shadow. Return fire ineffective, ricocheting uselessly. The recruits froze. Kids with rifles staring at real death. Positions. Prone. Spread. Eyes wide, hands steady. Don't look at the targets, I said. Look at the wind. Dust. Heat shimmer. The environment will speak. I dropped beside them, scope glinting, rifle ready. I didn't fire. Not yet. Observation first. Listening. Testing who had internalized the lessons. A young recruit exhaled, finger curling on the trigger. First shot cracked, echoed, then silence. One ambusher slumped. Imperfect, yes, but deliberate. Others followed. Shots staggered, purposeful. No panic. No luck. Just listening, adapting, reacting. 3 minutes later, the ambushers broke. Scrambling, retreating. The convoy held. The recruits looked at me, searching for approval, explanation, validation. I gave neither. For words, this is just beginning. The ride back was quiet. Not triumphant, not celebratory. Hands gripped rifles, eyes fixed on the floor or sky. The desert smelled of powder and dust. Each of them carried weight. First lesson learned. At base, command waited. Brass polished, faces eager, eyes hungry for proof. Outstanding work, said the range commander. Convoy saved. You should be proud. I didn't smile. They had survived, yes, but survival alone was not mastery. I saw potential, raw and unrefined. That was enough for now. Later, in the quiet of my quarters, I opened Logan Reeves' journal. Worn pages, detailed notes, invisible patterns. Breath, wind, echoes. I hadn't touched it in years. But after today, after watching the transformation from students to survivors, I knew it was time. Time to teach what I had always promised myself I would pass on. Command didn't understand. They couldn't. They wanted measurable results, numbers, reports. They wanted weapons. I wanted humans who could survive the silence of the battlefield and trust instincts more than orders. Command didn't wait long. Within days, orders started filtering through. Reports to submit. Curriculum to document. Recruits to be reassigned under central oversight. Every suggestion came sharpened into an implicit demand. Your program belongs to us now. I listened. I nodded. And then I walked straight back to the range and ignored it all. They didn't understand. They couldn't. Instinct isn't something you teach on paper. Silence isn't something you codify. The methods I had honed over years in shadows, across deserts, canyons, and hostile territory, they weren't instructions. They were life itself. To attempt replication was to destroy it. At night, under the open desert sky, I gathered my 12 again. No records, no observers, no one but us and the stars. I told them, forget the manuals. Forget the charts. The world doesn't wait for tables or algorithms. You listen. You feel. You trust the environment around you. They fidgeted at first. Some frowned. Others sneaked glances at each other, questioning if this was pointless. But by the third session, the tension melted. Their shoulders dropped. Their eyes softened. They began to notice the subtle rhythms. The scrape of dust across stone, the faint shimmer of heat above a boulder, the pause between echoes as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Santos, the youngest, finally asked what no one else dared. Ma'am, why aren't you running all of this? Why hide here? I met his eyes. Raw honesty. Impossible to lie. Command doesn't want a person, I said quietly. They want a weapon. Weapons don't get to choose who pulls the trigger. No one spoke again. Not necessary. Understanding settled in their faces. They weren't just learning to shoot. They were learning how not to be used. Then the pushback arrived faster than I anticipated. 2 colonels, flanked by MPs, materialized on the range. The message was blunt, mechanical. The program was no longer mine. Reassigned the recruits immediately. My role was reduced to advisor. I signed the forms, saluted, stepped aside exactly as expected. They thought the battle was won. But that night, far on the edge of the valley, I met with my 12. Where the desert swallowed sound. Where silence spoke louder than guns. They'll try to bend you, I told them. Keep what I've taught you quiet. Keep it yours. Silence can't be stolen. They nodded. Moonlight painted their faces. I knew in that moment the legend I had once carried. The Wraith line, the one they had tried to bury, was no longer mine. It was theirs, and they were ready to carry it forward, even without me standing beside them. The colonels thought they had control. They had authority. They had signatures and stamps. but they had no understanding of instinct, no grasp of silence. And that made all the difference. It didn't take long for the field to test them again. Routine drills, structured exercises, those were gone. The desert doesn't give warnings, and neither do the people who try to kill your convoy. Halfway through a late morning session, the sirens cut through Blackstone Range with the kind of urgency that leaves no room for hesitation. Not a drill, not a simulation. Real. Smoke coiled up from a ridge 2 miles east. A convoy had been ambushed, pinned between rocky outcrops. Quick reaction forces were stretched too thin. Positions, I ordered. 12 pairs of eyes snapped to me. Kids with rifles, trembling at first, gripping them like lifelines. Fear hung heavy, but beneath it, something else had taken root. Instinct. Remember what I taught you, I said, voice low, firm. Breathe. Don't chase the fight. Listen. Let the environment guide your actions. We moved fast, across the sun-baked desert. My team spread, took cover, scanning every shadow, every glint of sunlight that could hide danger. The ambush unfolded slowly, methodically. 2 trucks disabled, muzzle flashes springing from rock and shadow, return fire ricocheting off stone, ineffective. The recruits froze for the first heartbeat. Real death looks nothing like drills, nothing like simulations. Don't look at the targets, I told them. Look at the wind. Look at dust. Heat shimmer. Listen, the environment will tell you what to do. I dropped prone beside them, rifle at the ready. I didn't fire. Not yet. Observation first. Testing who had truly absorbed the lessons, who had internalized instinct over fear. Then a shot cracked. One recruit exhaled slow, squeezed, hit a camouflage target. Another followed. The others staggered their shots, calculated, purposeful. Imperfect, yes, but deliberate. Not panic. Not luck. Listening, adjusting, trusting what they'd learned. Within 3 minutes, the ambushers broke. Scrambling, retreating. The convoy survived. They looked at me, searching for guidance, validation. I said nothing, for words were enough. This is just beginning. The ride back was quiet. Not triumphant. Not celebratory. Each recruit carried the weight of the first real test, a lesson no drill could teach. At base, brass waited. Polished faces, eager, hungry. Outstanding work, the range commander said. The convoy was saved. You should be proud. I didn't respond. Survival alone was not mastery. The raw potential was there, but unrefined, incomplete. That was enough for now. Later, in the quiet of my quarters, I opened Logan Reeves' journal. Pages worn thin, filled with notes on wind, breath, echoes, the invisible language of survival. I hadn't touched it in years. Now I had no choice. I had to teach the depth of what I knew. Command still didn't understand. They never would. They wanted measurable results. I wanted humans who could survive the silence of the battlefield, who could trust instinct over orders. The aftermath hit faster than I expected. Within hours, the brass were calling, radios buzzing with clipped urgency. Command wanted reports, debriefs, metrics, proof that this wasn't luck. They wanted names, distances, times, success rates. They wanted to catalog instinct and silence like a spreadsheet. I ignored the calls. I let them send observers to the range, clipboards in hand, polite questions they didn't expect answers for. My recruits, my 12, understood immediately. Nothing on paper could capture what they had learned, what they had felt under fire. Colonels arrived in person a few days later, flanked by MPs. Their orders were clear. The program no longer belonged to me. Reassign the recruits. Reduce my role to advisor. Sign here. Comply. Obey. I signed. I saluted. I stepped aside exactly as expected. But that night, under the vast expanse of desert stars, I found my 12. At the far edge of the valley where sound died in stone, where the wind whispered secrets, I spoke plainly. They'll try to take you, bend you, shape you into what they want. Keep what I've taught you quiet. Keep it yours. Silence can't be stolen. They nodded, moonlight painting their faces. Understanding settled like dust. They weren't just learning to shoot. They were learning to survive, to trust their instincts, to move unseen and unheard, to listen when the world screamed. My legend, the Wraith line, was no longer mine to carry. It was theirs, and they would carry it forward without me. The colonels believed they had won. Authority, signatures, bureaucratic power. but they had no understanding of instinct, no comprehension of silence. That made all the difference. Within 48 hours, whispers of Blackstone Range spread across 3 bases. Mess halls, barracks, officers' lounges, they all spoke quietly, cautiously. Some tales were exaggerated, some exact. All ended the same way: Voss. Blackstone Range. 12 survivors who fired under my guidance. Even under new instructors, the 12 carried themselves differently. Posture, breathing, listening. Silent commands, quiet communication. The system tried to mold them, to pull them back into the bureaucracy. But instinct cannot be filed away. Silence cannot be stamped, inactive. And so, the legend grew. Not mine, not written by command, but alive in the 12 who had learned, who had survived, who now carried it forward. I packed my case one final time. Rifle, journal, nothing else. The desert wind tugged at my sleeves as I walked toward the firing line. The range was quiet, emptier than usual, yet the eyes of Blackstone Valley followed me, unseen but felt. The 12 recruits, my team, stood apart, hands resting lightly on rifles. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their silence carried more weight than any orders, any applause, any certificate from command. They had absorbed the lessons, internalized them. They were ready to survive, to act, to think independently. One by one, they lowered their rifles. Not surrender, not protest. Just listening, just breathing, just understanding. I didn't look back. I didn't wave. I didn't say goodbye. I walked past, footsteps soft on gravel, but each step echoed in my memory. The desert wind curled around me, carrying whispers across the stones, past the cliffs, over the valley. It was as if the range itself acknowledged the passing of something important, something that had once been mine but now belonged to the land, to the air, to those who would carry it forward. Blackstone Range was no longer theirs. It never had been. It had always been mine, and now it was theirs too. Command would try again. They would attempt to impose structure, bureaucracy, oversight. They would fail. Silence cannot be owned. Instinct cannot be stamped. And the 12, and those who come after them, would keep it alive. I paused at the edge of the valley, letting the wind curl around me. I listened. The desert whispered its truths. Echoes of practice, echoes of the ambush, echoes of lessons learned under starlight. The weight of the rifle, the precision, the instinct, it all felt lighter now. Shared. Passed on. For years, they had tried to bury me, to erase the history of Wraithline, to fold my skills into the machinery of command. But legends don't die. They spread quietly, invisibly, carried in actions rather than words. I smiled faintly. Not for recognition. Not for glory. For understanding. The kind that comes without speaking, the kind that survives in silence, in instinct, in the places others cannot reach. And then I kept walking. Blackstone Range remained. The wind sang through the canyon walls. The desert was silent, but alive. And those who ever picked up a rifle there would know. The legacy of listening, of instinct, of survival, belonged to them. It had always been ours.